Is it possible to turn up the house lights a little bit? I like to see who I'm talking to. Oh, that's so much better. Thank you so much. First of all, I'm really delighted to meet Becca. I told her when I just met her backstage that when I heard about Thistle Farms from a friend of both of ours, Franny Kieschnick, I immediately made a donation, and I invite everybody else to make a donation immediately. And I do that because one of the things that I've learned in my world of being a global pro-activist rather than an activist. I call myself a pro-activist, an activist for, not against. I have found in 40 years of being involved with global issues that we need to address what's between us and the solutions and the world we want. But if we're fighting always against it, something happens to us and we're no longer effective. We become what we're fighting against. And so being a pro-activist, an activist for, allows you to stay deeply committed to your vision, the vision of the world you want, and deal from there with what's in the way, what's blocking the world that we all see, the world that we're standing for, the world that we want. And in all of that work, if you're an activist of any kind, you need to raise money. It's a kind of some people call it an occupational hazard, but I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of being up to something worthy of asking other people to make a donation, to make a contribution, to find a way to move the money that flows through their life towards the highest good. So I consider fundraising sacred. And we're talking here about sacred insight and feminine wisdom. I feel that the years and years and years and years and years I've had of inviting people to contribute money to the things they care most about has been sacred work. And I've learned a lot about money. I've learned a lot about our relationship with money. I've learned a lot about our addiction to money. I've learned a lot about how money is in many ways, if you kind of address money, you get at the root of so many of the problems that push people to do things that are so inconsistent with their own humanity. That we live in a culture of money that lies to us, that promises all kinds of things. But when it comes right down to it, it's our inner riches that give us what we're looking for, not our outer riches. Yet the culture of money, the consumer culture, the commercial culture, is so intense, so heavy, so intrusive, so all-encompassing, that we can hardly find our way back to our inner life, except in a conference like this glorious Festival of Faith, which I've been wishing I could come to for many years, and I'm finally here, yay! So I know we're going to hear from Becca and these beautiful young women who have found their way out of the horrors of addiction. But I want to tell myself and all of us that the addictions that we have just to have more of anything and everything is where it begins. I believe that our culture, the culture of intense money culture, the culture that tells us we need more of everything, that there's not enough this, there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough volunteers, there's not enough Tuesdays, there's not enough hours in the day, there's not enough hours in the night, there's not enough sleep. This sort of there is not enough, it's not enough, I'm not enough, it's not enough, there's not enough, we're not enough, it's not enough, I'm not enough. Culture has us thinking in a deficit relationship with everything we see. And it actually is a lens. One of the co-founders of this wonderful festival, Christy Brown, is talking about now how we can put a lens on everything so we can look through the world with a commitment to health. And I say, in order to do that, we need to realize that we have an unconscious, unexamined lens that almost everybody in the world, and I think pretty much everybody in the world, looks through. And that's the lens of scarcity. An unconscious, unexamined assumption that there's not enough. It's unconscious, it's unexamined, and I'm saying that it's a lie. Now, if you're living in Ethiopia and you don't have a job, thank you. If you're living in Ethiopia and you don't have a job, or you're living in Malawi and you don't have any access to water, I'm not talking about that now because I've worked very intimately on issues of hunger and poverty throughout my life. I know there's places where people don't have enough, but I'm talking about us. I'm talking about you and me. I'm talking about many, 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 many hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of people who do have exactly what they need. Yet the mindset, the way they look out into the world, the lens they're looking through that's unconscious and unexamined is there's not enough, it's not enough, I'm not enough, we don't have enough, more is better, more of this, more of that, more of this, more of that. And the consumer culture is so intense. In a major American city like this one, people receive somewhere between 3,000 and 30,000 messages a day telling them they need more of something. They're inadequate until they acquire it. And so this there's not enough, it's not enough scarcity mentality ultimately gets down into the root of who we think we are, and we live in a deficit relationship with ourselves. It's not just, it's not enough, there's not enough. It starts to really be, I am not enough. And from there, people make very, very devastating choices. People think that if they just have more of this or more of that, everything will be okay. And I call this the Great Lie of Scarcity that's caught all of us and our culture in taking way, 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 way more than we need. I'm accusing all of us of being people who take way more than they need. If you really think about your closet, if you think about your storage shed, if you think about your garage, if you think about all the things that we acquire that we really don't need. In fact, one of the largest industries in the United States now, one of the fastest growing industries in the United States is storage. Just think about storage. What is that? It's very odd, storage. When you think about it, I live in San Francisco, and I know the same problem exists here in Louisville. We have massive homeless problem, massive, massive numbers of people who don't have homes. But we're not building houses for them. We're building houses and little cities for the stuff we cannot fit in the houses that we already have or the apartments we already have. And it's a huge industry now. Waste, storage, these industries that are growing like mad are the indictment of a culture that thinks more is better no matter what, indiscriminately more is better. And this addiction to more, this addiction to accumulate, this addiction to consume has turned us from citizens, people who are responsible for the well-being of the community. Citizens, a beautiful word for a human being. People who are responsible for the well-being of the state, the well-being of the country, the well-being of the world. That's a beautiful label for a human being. We used to call ourselves that. If you remember being a citizen, remember being called a citizen. But we have devolved in the last 20, 30, 40 years with the consumer culture being so intense that we've now become consumers. We're called consumers. Just think about what that says about you and me. The word consumer means he or she who takes, diminishes, depletes, or destroys. And that's what we're called now. That's even what we kind of refer to ourselves as. In fact, that's how we're marketed to. That's how our political leaders decide who we are and how to talk to us. That's how our news feed comes in, by our consumer patterns. That's how the internet, or whoever's in charge of the net, those algorithms, those robots, decide what you're going to read each day. So we have devolved now from citizens, human beings, who are interested in the well-being of life, to consumers, people who are measured, marketed to, talked to by our habits, what we take, deplete, diminish, or destroy. This has created an addictive culture that's so intense that we don't even know we're in it. And it's not only the addiction of drugs and alcohol, obesity, mental illness. It's an addiction to a way of living that we all know is unhealthy, that does not look through the lens of health, but looks through an unconscious, unexamined mindset of scarcity. And you could say, from that unconscious, unexamined mindset of scarcity, we make constant decisions and choices that are inconsistent with our humanity. And I say this to us today in this glorious, glorious conference, Festival of Faiths, that we don't kind of know that we're living in a kind of trance. The indigenous people I work with in the Amazon rainforest call it the dream of the modern world, a trance that's so thick, so deep, that we don't even know we're in it. We can't even see our own eyeballs. And the intensity of the trance is very difficult to wake up from. The way we've woken up, those of us here in this room, and those of us who have faith, is to find our way to a spiritual core, that what I call the well of being, which is the source of well-being, the well of our own being. But this consumer culture, if you're caught in it, and I suggest perhaps you are, it's not your personal rainstorm. I like to say this, it's raining on everybody else too. And that gives you some permission to see that it's not your fault if you're caught in the trance of scarcity, more. And I've learned that there's sort of a whole range of toxic myths, I call them, that make up this mindset of scarcity. The first being, there's not enough, a real ingrained belief that there's not enough. The second toxic myth, more is better, more of anything. More square feet in our house, more freeways, more companies, more market share, more this, more that, more money, more sex, more vacations, more this, more that. And that mindset is so intense that it's indiscriminate. It's indiscriminate, and is the source of huge environmental degradation. And the third toxic myth, first being there's not enough, second, more is better, and the third, that's just the way that it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that is the source of profound resignation, profound discouragement, profound loss of soul and belonging. We go for belongings instead of recognizing that what we're longing for is belonging. And when we clear away the mindset of scarcity and recognize that we have enough, that we are enough, that there is enough, we begin to see when the crazy notion of scarcity clears away. Every once in a while it happens when you watch the sunset, when a baby is born, when you have a moment, a sweet moment with a grandchild, when you let go of a grudge and you find your soul. You realize not only is there enough, but the profound experience of being met by the universe is really what's happening every single day. That we are sufficient, we are enough. And when we're in touch with that profound enoughness in who we are, then it overflows into what I call the real, true prosperity of life. There's a saying from my wonderful teacher, Brother David Stendal-Rast, if you know him. He's a living icon of gratefulness. And he says, gratefulness has two great branches. Gratitude has two great branches. I once asked Brother David, who's 91, almost 92, a Benedictine monk who lives in absolute total gratefulness for every minute of every day. He's an incredible teacher for me. I asked him, what's the difference between gratitude and gratefulness? And he said this: gratitude has two great branches. One is gratefulness, the other is thanksgiving. Gratefulness is the experience of life when the bowl of life is so full that it's almost overflowing, but not quite. That's when the bowl of life is so full that it's bowed at the top, but not yet dribbling over the edges. And that's the experience of the great fullness of life. And when you're in the great fullness of life, you're one with God, you're one with the universe, and there is no other. And it's so fulfilling that the bowl of life starts to overflow, and that puts you in the other branch of gratitude, thanksgiving. And when you live in the branch of gratitude called thanksgiving, the bowl of life is overflowing like a fountain. And then you're so thrilled to discover there is an other, because all you want to do is give and serve and contribute and share of your bounty. And that is so fulfilling that it puts you over here in the great fullness of life again, when you're one with God and there is no other, and the great fullness of life is all you can feel, and then it overflows into a fountain, and you're over here in the great bowl of thanksgiving, and it's overflowing. You can't wait to give, to serve, and share with everybody everywhere. And these two branches of gratitude are where we can live when we let go of the siren song of more. When we let go of the lie that there's not enough or that we're not enough, when we actually find our soul, and when we not let the money culture grab us by the throat, have us be people we don't want to be, and fall prey to so many of the things that take our soul away. So that's a little piece of the work of the Soul of Money Institute, transforming our relationship with money and life, which I hope begins to get at the root of the addictions that plague our society, more of which we'll talk about in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a few moments for observations or questions from our other panelists. I'm a journalist, so I have lots of questions.
You do.
So maybe I'll start. I want to start with this notion of being an activist for and not against. That really struck me because a lot of activism, I think, is driven by, I've got to stop something bad from happening. For example, with the opioid crisis, a lot of it is we have to stop this bad thing that's happening. How might we view that differently if we come at it from the approach that you're talking about of being an activist for, not against? What would we be for in that instance?
Well, I would take a page from Christy Brown's book that if we are looking through the lens of health, then what we are envisioning is a healthy community, healthy people, people who have access to the health and well-being that gives you the access to your own well of being. And so if you're rooted in the vision of health, the way you deal with what's blocking health is different than the angry, hurtful, resentful way that we sometimes behave as activists, where you get caught in the dark side, really. Now, you have to engage with it, of course. I'm not saying not to, because I have a lot of work that I've done over the years of working on ending world hunger, transforming relationship with money, obviously working with the empowerment of women, this beautiful sacred feminine energy that we feel here, and also now the work I do in the Amazon. But if you're rooted in, if you're standing for the vision, your actions are much, much more powerful. There's this wonderful phrase that I love. It comes from Michael Beckwith, one of the wonderful ministers of Agape Church, and he says, "Pain pushes until vision pulls." Pain pushes until vision pulls. And if you're someone who's working to resolve the great problems of our world, if you're standing in the vision, you can pull people out of their pain. Pain will push people so far, but until they have a vision, it's hard to get out of the grip of the pain. So that's the best answer I can give you now.
Thoughts or observations?
I love what you said. I mean, I really, really do. And I think as people who hawk bath and body care products to people all over the country and try to get them to buy more.
That's okay, it's okay.
I love the idea that, for me at least, moving from consumer to citizen is a beautiful way of seeing it and thinking of not purchasing but investing, of thinking about how it is we put our money where our values are. I love that whole thought. And I just wanted to hear just how do you think that people make that move? Like, what's a step people take to move into putting to move back into citizenship. I mean, I don't know if it's called responsible consumership, or, I mean, you have to buy your soap from somewhere.
Right.
So, but, I mean, how do you help people make that move? How do you help people do it?
Well, I think it's really a matter of, let's see, it's a matter of unlearning habits that we've become so addicted to that we don't even know we have them, and paying attention. It's so incredible to be with a group of people who pay attention, who are meditators, who have attention and intention, releasing tension. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there is a huge movement, as you know, for buying green products and making sure you're not buying something that supports slave labor. And some of these, is it because it's cheaper? Is it actually really better? Or is it something that we're harming someone somewhere? We have this, there's this phrase of making a living. But many of us, without knowing it, are making a killing by the way we buy, by the way we earn. Many of us are making a dying by the way we buy, by the way we earn. And when you find that out, when you begin to be conscious of that, I think that's a huge part of what we need to do, is to wake people up. Because global warming, something I work on, can be reversed. It's not irreversible. We don't need to mitigate it or fight it or stop it. We can reverse it. We can reverse it. We created it, we can reverse it. So, to go on the biggest possible scale, the consequences of being unconscious about the way we use our money is so enormous. And when we start really realizing that, getting educated about it, waking up to it, it's really beautiful to put money and soul in the same space and look through the lens of health, healing, and well-being. Because true wealth doesn't have anything to do with money. I know money's good and I love it and it's great to have it. But true wealth comes from the well of being that is infinite in every human being. And when we know that, you live a different way, you make different choices, and you have a different future. And it impacts and serves everyone and everything for future generations.